Okay, so I'll be very honest. If there's something that I've learned about friends with benefits and most casual situationships, is it those things are rarely ever casual after a while. Like, they never stay casual. And every single time people are gonna be like, oh, it was just a casual thing. That shit never goes casual. I don't know why. Whether it's someone catching feelings, whether it's someone realizing that whatever exclusivity was supposed to be there wasn't there, whether it's the disassociation of the feelings, whether it's feelings being caught, like, there's so many ways in which that shit stops being casual at some point, even though the benefits continue, at least to some degree. And this case is actually one of them. And I'm going to get into all of that. But before I can get into any of it, first of all, where are my manners? I should have started off with an intro of some sort. So, welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is Sir Denver B. This is a shorter, less edity, no instrumentally version of the podcast that I basically do when I'm on break, which is usually for me to get a chance at some R&R, but at the same time provide you guys with some pretty nice content that is basically derived off of my thoughts on certain things and certain conversations, and also certain pieces of content that I feel just need to be talked about at least to some degree. And in this particular case, it is more or less the same thing, because I actually stumbled onto a particularly interesting post that was anonymously sent, which honestly kind of had to make me go into a topic that I feel is very tricky and nearly impossible to get a clean answer from, like, a couple of people in the same place at the same time. And most of the people that are involved in it actually will have divisive ideas and opinions on the entire thing. And weirdly enough, you think that it's something super complicated or like super technical, but it's not. It's actually just money. But it's not money the way you would think about it. It's money in the way you'd kind of think of how you'd give it. But I am going to get into the details in a little bit. So let me start by giving a quick description or idea of where all of this came from. So I was on IG not too long ago, and as I was on IG, someone had told me to check out this guy called Onyango Otieno on IG, who is known by the IG handle Rick's Poet. So I go and I check out his stories, because I was basically told to go check out his stories. There are a couple of anonymous things that have been put there that are pretty interesting. So as I'm busy flipping through, and as I'm busy enjoying the wildness that is people online busy giving their stories anonymously, I stumble across this one particular instance where it wasn't really the story itself, but the whole scenario that just reminded me how tricky situationships, or should I say casual relationships, can be. So it was someone who said, and I quote, "Hey Rix, I have this friends with benefits, and we've been fucking since 2023. He asked me for money, which is such a turn off for me coming from a man. Mind you, I have never asked him for money. Should I tell him it bothers me? And I didn't send him any, by the way." End quote. And Rick's Poet did kind of give his own breakdown on it, but it kind of did remind me how it is particularly tricky when you're in a situation like that, because, like, there's no real perfect way to be like, okay, this is how you should handle it, because it kind of goes into a sort of gray area where this is someone that you're intimately, or should I say sexually involved with, but then not like your actual partner. And, first of all, like, even just money discussions between two people that are in like a serious relationship can be tough. But now imagine a casual thing. Like, that's even more tricky. But at the same time, when it's a serious relationship, the money conversation is much bigger and it can be stretched out a lot longer, because there's a lot more that can be discussed there. If it's a casual thing, like, that shit can end in a heartbeat. Like, that's something that people who get into casual flings or situationships or friends with benefits are, for the most part, sort of aware of. So it does kind of blur the lines a little bit there, because money itself is a tricky subject, but the sort of casual nature of a friends with benefits type situationship or relationship is also something that's even trickier beyond just, whatever it is that you guys could involve between each other. So either way, armed with the intrigue of seeing this post, I kind of just had to take a look at it and kind of think through this entire thing, because if anything, for a guy that discusses relationships, love, and sex, I might as well discuss some of the nitty gritties. And also, it's been a while since I talked about situationships. And it's not like these things are slowing down, it's not like they stopped. Might as well discuss them because they're a part of the whole love, sex, and relationships realm out here. But, anyways, with that said, like, I'm not gonna lie. One of the things that I find to be particularly interesting, I don't want to say weird, I don't want to say wrong, but interesting, is the idea of women feeling turned off or being turned off by a guy asking them for money. Like, okay, I think there are certain instances where you can get disgusted or turned off by someone when they ask you for money. But in this particular person's case, like, they've been doing the do for somewhere close to 2 years. So you saying, okay, even call it a year, maybe a year and a half, like, just the thought of it is a little bit wild, because you're telling me that just because I'm in a position where I might be a little financially down, not that I have a history of being financially just irresponsible or some shit, or I have a history or I'm known for borrowing money and not returning it, like, I've basically just asked for money and it's automatically become a turn off. I don't know. Like, I don't want to say maybe it's a trauma response and shit, because that just feels like I'm weaponizing psychology language, but I don't know. It just feels a little bit wild and a little bit on the wrong side to be like, okay, if you ask for money and you're a man, honestly, like, umenitoka, you are no longer in my system. I get so turned off and I feel such an ick about it. Like, that is actually quite mad. Especially considering that you've been doing the do with this person for like 2 years. Like, that shit is wild though. But, then again, this is something that I haven't heard for the first time in this case. I have heard a bunch of different women say such a thing. And while I do find it a little bit wild, I guess for them that's just a normal thing. But either way, let me just leave it at that. I won't dwell on that per se, because there are instances where you can actually get turned off by someone that you are supposed to be intimately and possibly sexually involved with, and they ask you for money. Like, for example, if I was doing it with a babe today and then a day or two later she's asking me for cash, it is going to seem a little bit off for me. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like you can decide when you're found by hardship or anything, but there are some instances where it's just a simple case of, I don't think we know each other like that for us to actually give the money. Like, I have actually seen instances where a guy is asked for cash by a babe that he's trying to bang, and then he refuses and he's like, nah, that's not how I roll. And the baby's like, oh, so you want me to open my legs but you can't open your wallet? And at that point, like, I heard that shit and I was like, what the fuck? Like, this shit wasn't supposed to be transactional. Why does it feel like it's starting to go down that route? And I feel like that sort of guilt trip just seems a little bit off, personally speaking. But then again, maybe that's just me. But all in all, I do think that if it's like a very, very tiny period of time, then okay, you seeing it as an ick or a turn off makes sense. But if you've been doing it for a while, then I personally don't really think that way. But the truth of it is, relationships and situationships of this kind just aren't really built for complexities such as handling money between two people. Like, you look at relationships and the money subject is already tricky in and of itself. But like I said, it's an overtime thing and there's way more complexity to it. But at the end of the day, it's not as hard, if your partner asks you for a loan and if you have the money, you can give it to them. If the money comes, if it doesn't come, like, there's ways to handle that. But even then, it's still not as stable. Like, it has some stability and, it's not as tricky, but it is still a little bit tricky. But now you're taking the absolute unstableness of a casual situationship, like a friends with benefits, and then you throw asking for a loan in that, and that shit becomes absolutely wild. Like, you don't know if you're opening Pandora's box. You don't know if you're supposed to ask for help. You don't know if you're entitled to that help, because if you're sharing body fluids with someone and you're bumping uglies and shit, then shouldn't you, if you have that level of vulnerability, also entrust that sort of person with, a little bit of money, if it's like a loan or if it's like, maybe call it a grant, or just giving the money or some shit. Like, shouldn't it be like that simple? But then you look at it practically and then you're like, I don't think this is a very good idea. And then suddenly it's like, okay, this is a tricky position because asking for money has never carried that level of instability for quite a number of people. But then again, it's not like there's that many people that are in constant friends with benefit relationships that actually last all that long. But either way, like, when I kind of do think about it, I don't think that it's actually supposed to be that big of an issue. Not unless if the other person that is asking for that money just doesn't have the financial responsibility, or it interferes with your financial principles and values. Like, in that case, like, it's fine, don't give it to them. But if it doesn't interfere with any of that, then in my humble opinion, I feel like the question shouldn't be whether you should or you shouldn't give that person. It's more of, is it something that you would do for your friends? Because, like, the way I look at it, a friends with benefits, yes, there is definitely the fact that it's a casual but, mutually beneficial sort of sexual relationship that's there. But the first word in it is friends. Like, how can you enjoy the benefits without you guys having some level of friendliness? And if you guys are technically friends, much as there are benefits, shouldn't you apply the same sort of scrutiny and the same sort of principles that you would with your other friends, regardless of gender? So in that case, it kind of puts you in a position where instead of wondering whether you should give said person because you're shagging them, or, because you guys have been doing the do for a while, it's just a simple question of, do I give money to my friends or not? Because there are people that have their financial values set such that they don't give money to their immediate friends, probably because they wouldn't want money issues to sour things out between them. And there's other people that are like, you know what, if my friend is down, I'm going to do everything possible to help them up. And they're very willing to give the money. And of course, there's everyone else in between. So in that case, you're like, you know what, if I give it to certain friends because I know them for a while and I've known this person for an equally long time, even though y'all aren't tight to the point where it's like you guys will go and watch football games and shit, I do think that they also deserve some level of leniency because they are technically a friend. And when you think about things like that, it simplifies a lot in your life, because if you're the kind of person that has to think through things, especially when it comes to money, because it's not like there's a shit ton of money just going around for everyone. And by the time you're deciding to give money to someone, there's that whole thought of, can I trust this person? If I give them the money, will it come back? Is it something that's worth doing? Does it mess up the whole dynamic of our friendship or relationship and shit? Like, instead of having to think through all of that garbage, just jump to the question of, okay, I've known this person for X amount of time and us guys are pretty tight. Can I trust them the same way that I would trust my friends? And if you can answer that question, I feel like it would become a lot easier when it comes to making certain financial decisions like that. But you know what? At the end of the day, I could be wrong about this shit. So let me just conclude by saying that in this particular case, there isn't really a universally right answer. Like, there isn't a particularly right answer. It is entirely based off of your financial values and principles when it comes to how you lend to certain people. Because at the end of the day, it's not like my principles and my values are going to match some other person. It's not like mine and Stormzy's are the same. It's not like mine and even my brothers are the same. Like, everyone has their own sort of financial values and principles that they live by. So provided that you implement it in the same exact way that you would implement it on your friends, I think that, it's not really that big of a problem, at least in my opinion. But all in all, like, I think it is entirely up to you. And while there is no right answer, the true answer is, as long as you're not an asshole about it, it shouldn't be too big of a problem. Although, then again, I could be wrong about that. Just to say, I could be wrong about so many other things. So I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the breaktime podcast. On X, it is at Bagaka the D. And on Bluesky, it is at the breaktimepod.bsky.social. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.